Good evening, everyone. We're here today again to talk another extraordinary story. We have Michael Anthony today. A lot of you probably know him with the Think Unbroken. It's a privilege to have him in our podcast. As you all know, we're trying to create something to bring awareness. We're trying to share positive messages, positive stories, and Michael, it's a it's a hell of a story. So Michael, thank you for joining us. Usually what I ask is people to just give a quick intro who you are for the ones that do not know you, just to set the scene.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, it's my pleasure. Thanks for taking the time to have me on. The high level quick pitch is I grew up in Midwest America, suffered a lot of trauma and abuse from my parents, people in my life, went down a battle of addiction starting at 12 years old, dealt with obesity, dealt with multiple suicide attempts. And by the time I was in my late 20s, I made some decisions and changes to my life that forever have made me who I am today. So now what I do is I created a company called Think Unbroken, which is about understanding the mindset and science behind trauma and how we can create a healthy and sustainable lifestyle.
Cool. You know, when I was just telling you before we started the recording, when I went to figure out who you are, because I got the reference to you from someone that was reading your book, I went to start reading about your story, and man, you went through a lot. I talked to people that went through child abuse, people that went through violence and drug addiction, but you had quite a lot of different things. How do you get out of it? And I'm honestly asking because it's such a painful journey.
Yeah, it's hard. I think that you have to come to this place, and this is just my own personal experience, and I've asked a lot of people this question, and so maybe one day someone can tell me something different, but it hasn't happened yet. I think before you can start to create change in your life, you actually have to hit rock bottom. Like, you have to hit that place in your life where you're just fed up with yourself, where you're sick of the things that you're doing, and you come to this decision where you decide, all right, I'm going to be accountable for myself. I'm going to be responsible for myself. I'm going to be honest with myself and look myself in the mirror and say, okay, from this day forward, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get healthy. Because until you have that moment, until you have that reconciliation with yourself, nothing changes. And it took me until 28 years old for that to happen. And then from there, it's kind of just finding out what works best for you. For me, because my child abuse was so in depth, I had so much chaos and trauma that I was stuck in what I call the vortex. I was just literally in this place where everything was awful. And the only way that I could work through that was by any means necessary. And so, I mean, not only did I do traditional therapy, but I tried all of the therapies from EMDR to NLP to cognitive behavioral therapy. I tried tapping. I tried all of those things. And then I tried non-conventional things like Reiki, and I tried massage therapy and Rolfing, which to me, like massage and touch that was in a healthy manner was such an important part of my journey. And then journaling and writing, men's group therapy, AA, NA, all of the A's. I basically, you know what it was, man? I made this declaration to myself in this moment of hitting rock bottom that I would do whatever it took to be healthy. And it cost me a lot of time, energy, effort, and money. And a big portion of that was also in education. And so I started going to seminars and symposiums where I would be literally the only person in the room who was not a doctor. And I read all the books and all the white papers and listened to all the podcasts. And that was the biggest thing, because I decided, like, no matter what, no matter how much money it took, no matter how much time it took or effort it took, I was going to get healthy. And so, there's always a way is kind of the declaration that I made to myself. And I just dove in head first with no expectations. And that was 8 years ago.
Okay. So just for everyone to understand, because what you just described is a terrific process, but I think people will not understand until they realize to a certain extent what happened to you, right? Because I read your story, but if they
Yes.
don't know, we're talking about something that is really powerful and really impactful. You don't have to tell us everything, but if you could just give us a highlight what happened to you so people understand the powerful change you made in your life, that will really, really helpful.
Yeah, totally. And you're right. And I think that you do have to come to terms with the fact that bad stuff happened to you.
Yeah.
I spent most of my life keeping it buried down because it's easier that way. You don't have to deal with it. It's never in your face, but then it starts eating you from the inside out. And suddenly you're like, oh no, why am I like this? And it's because of the things that happened in your past. And so going back, so my mother was a drug addict and alcoholic. She actually cut my finger off when I was about 4 years old. I never met my father. My stepfather was hyper abusive. He's the kind of guy like you pray would never be your stepfather, and like he would kick the shit out of my brothers and I all the time. Think about little kids just getting thrown into walls and locked in closets and things like that. My grandmother adopted me when I was 12 years old because the chaos of that house was so intense, and we had been homeless for a couple of years at that point, bouncing from home to home to home, getting evicted, getting kicked out. I lived between 9 and 12 years old. I lived with almost 40 different families
Four
from,
zero. 40.
yes,
God.
from our church. And I grew up in the Mormon church, so now that's another layer of it, growing up in this really intense religion. And so my grandmother adopts me, and I'm living with her. So I'm biracial. I'm black and white. My
Yeah.
grandmother is an old white lady from Tennessee. And if you know anything about America, it's a very racist place. And so my grandmother was super racist. And like, so now I'm living in an almost all black neighborhood with this racist ass white grandma. And and so now I'm heading into my teens. And like your teens are nuts, dude, right? And
Yeah.
so I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is very strange. What do I do? And I started getting into drugs. So I started selling and doing drugs when I was 12 years old. I started breaking into houses, stealing cars, hurting people, running around with guns. I was high from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to bed.
With
I
12.
didn't graduate. Yeah, 12 years old.
Sure.
And that went on for a very, very long time. I didn't graduate high school on time. And then in my 20s, I kind of found my way through corporate America, working a suit and tie job, making six figures, doing better than anyone I knew at my age. And that only made my life worse because I had access to do what I wanted whenever I wanted to, because money can be this really powerful tool when
Mhm.
used the wrong way. And so I became morbidly obese, weighing 350 pounds, smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day, getting drunk almost pretty much every single night, and just having sex with hundreds and hundreds of people with no regard for my health or my safety. And then that leads me to being 28 years old and having this breakdown moment where I walked into the bathroom and I looked in the mirror and I was just like, the person who was on the other side of that mirror was not the person that I promised myself when I was a little kid that I was going to be. And I was buttoning up a size 4XL shirt and a size 47 pants, weighing 350 pounds. And I was just like, this has to change.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, and that was the moment. Like, it was a lot of little moments, right, leading up till that, including even on my 26th birthday. I put a gun in my mouth to kill myself. I just could not take it anymore. And when I pulled the trigger, the firing pin didn't strike the casing. It was a misfire. So for whatever reason, dude, I'm still here. And so, it was just a lot of breakdown moments, a lot of women telling me like I was bad, a lot of people in my life telling me that I wasn't doing shit. And one of the really hard parts about this is having friends who never really called me out.
Yeah.
They never were like, dude, get your life together. It was just kind of like, oh, that's just how he is. And so ultimately, it really came down to this moment where I just had to decide. It was either I'm going to change or I'm going to die.
So you called it if I recall correctly, the mirror moment, right?
Yeah,
So
very much so.
and I'm laughing not because it's funny, because I'm so I was born in a place in Portugal which is quite low income too as well, but I had nothing close to what you went through. But I've seen some people going pretty bad directions, right? So I managed to get
Hmm.
to college and get a decent job, but I've seen a lot of people I've grown up, I grew up not going the same direction, and I know that it's very hard to get out of it. And I've seen very talented young guys just end up not doing anything with their life. And that is one of the things I wanted to ask you is, so the job you're doing now, so you are working as a speaker, but mostly as a coach. You are helping others to overcome situations like yours, and you are somehow contributing to pay back to others what you went in your learnings, right?
Yeah.
How is that experience? Because I can imagine that knowing your story is one thing, but also hearing from others and not being in their knowing what they're feeling, but not being in there, it's not easy, right? So how do you deal with that? And what stories does bring to your mind, right?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I'm not a therapist, and so I want to be very clear about that. I honestly, I don't really give people a lot of space to dive into understanding the things that happen to them,
Yeah,
because that is the job of for them and for someone who is like a trained therapist.
yeah,
What and I have no interest in that. So I want to be very clear. I will never be a therapist. It's not interesting to me. But what is interesting to me is helping people develop plans and mindsets and holding them accountable and creating change. And that comes through sitting down and going, okay, what is it what is the thing that I want to accomplish in my life? What is that thing? How do I want to be? How do I want to live? How do I want to exist? And then we reverse engineer that all the way down to its very baseline level and go, okay, what is the first step that I need to do to get there?
mhm,
So for instance, like let's say if you wanted to lose 150 pounds, right? That's your high end goal. That's your Mount Everest. How do you do that? Well, sometimes it's literally just putting your shoes on and walking around the block one time a day, because it is such a hard task for your body to move physically. We have to start somewhere. Or let's say it's that you want to clean up your diet. Well, how do we do that? Or let's say it's that you want to find a way to start loving yourself. How do we do that? And maybe that loving yourself is, okay, we have to get down to the baseline where we're changing the way that you talk to yourself. So if all of your language has been negative up to this point, because that's embedded in you, right?
mhm,
You grew up in your youth with that, your parents gave that to you, your community gave that to you. Well, we are the stories that we tell ourselves. So if you're trying to get to this place, and so many people are like, I don't love myself. And I go, well, that's because you're not trying.
yeah,
Like you don't get to just magically love yourself, right? Even like you can't magically do anything. You have to
yeah.
put in work. And so that starts with this conversation that you're having with yourself. And we go, okay, well, if you're constantly in this place of negative self-talk, how do we interrupt that? What is the thing that we have to do to put you in a situation where you notice, first and foremost, that you're talking to yourself like that? And then secondly, when you have those moments, to interrupt them and change the language that you're using. So you go from I'm stupid, I'm dumb, I'm an idiot, nobody loves me, whatever, to, oh, I am strong, I am capable, I am handsome slash beautiful, I am powerful, I am strong, I am whatever, right? Because we, like, think about it, we have on average like 60,000 thoughts a day. Like some of them are going to be bad, and what happens is we get stuck in this loop of negative thoughts. Think about it, man, this has happened to all of us. That one bad thing just starts circulating in our brain,
Yeah.
and next thing you know, it's a week later and we're still thinking about that. Why? Because we didn't interrupt it, we didn't stop it, we're just in it. And so that's kind of the baseline. I always look at like, what is it that we're really trying to accomplish, and what's the lowest common denominator to the entry point to be able to accomplish it.
So if I get it right, so what you try to do is you try to use your experience how to overcome your own thing. It doesn't matter what is your thing, but and mentally work your brain to reverse engineer things that are not supposed to be there, and build a foundation to start thinking different and acting different and trusting yourself and liking yourself, or whatever other things that people have, right? Because it's not always about loving yourself. Sometimes it's just a different kind of problem, which is a bit the coaching type of thing, right? But and if I would, let's imagine I book you or I work with you to do that, there is always when you go through that journey with others, you're gonna probably think about yourself, and there is, as you said, there is this moment where you have this thought coming to your mind that may trigger you. Did you have any moment in the last 8 years where you kind of almost went back to some place that you did not want to go, and had a hard time to get out of it? Because that is
Yeah,
what I
totally.
always usually think about. That should be a very hard job to maintain, right?
Yeah, of course. Well, think about it. Maintain is a perfect word. Think about, like, you maintain your body, you maintain your diet, you maintain your relationship, right? But we don't do a great job of maintaining our mental health.
Yeah.
There is no questions asked, dude, that constantly, I mean, like literally, like probably every single day, I have to kind of reverse engineer these thought processes that happen. And I have to go through the practices and the processes that I've created to make sure that I'm staying on the path that I want to go down. Because it's not like you just kind of do this work and one day it goes away. I don't think it works like that. And it certainly hasn't worked like that for me. But now it's at this point where instantaneously I can change my thought pattern around something that happens. And so the longest, like really, like the longest bad shit carries with me anymore is like maybe 2 minutes, right? Because I'm like, okay, next, I can't do anything about it. And I've trained my brain. The brain's very plastic. It's so malleable. It wants to change. It wants to adapt because at its core, it is a device for survival. At the end of the day, your brain and your body are here to make you survive as long as possible. And so the moment that you retrain your brain to make survival being about talk, then it's easy to do that. But leading up till now, I mean, year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, very difficult, right? And I'm always in this place of trying to reprocess those things, especially in the beginning, man. Like one thing would send me through this loop and I'd be in this depressive state for weeks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a process of habit and doing and pushing through. And I think the most important thing that happened for me in those moments, especially early on, is when I would have these pieces of negative thought or action come into my life, I would force myself to do something really uncomfortable. And that being something healthy, uncomfortable, like going to the gym, like
Okay.
pushing my body physically, like meditating, like doing yoga, like journaling, like at least having a space that I could kind of push myself into a new platform. Because what happens, and the reason that I think we get stuck so often, is because we don't create any change in our life.
Yeah.
We're kind of like, oh man, our life sucks, but what am I doing about it? Nothing. And so you kind of create this lifestyle in which you're always pushing forward. Like even now, I'll give you a great example. It's not that I feel stagnant or it's not that I feel like I'm backtracking in any way. My life is right now, it's better than it's ever been. I am super happy with who I am as a person, my life, my relationships, my career. But I realized like, oh no, like I'm kind of stagnant in that. So because I hate it, started running. Like I hate running so much, dude. It is to me like the worst thing ever. And so I'm running 10 miles a week right now. And that's a very small number to begin with, but I'm running like 3 to 4 miles a day, twice a week or 3 times a week. And that's going to lead to me doing a marathon at some point in this year because I thought to myself, okay, you know what? You have to constantly push and be out of your comfort zone because without that, you can't grow. And so I feel like it's not that I've stopped growing, but like, how do I exponentiate it? Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the biggest thing. You're always going to fall back. Like there will always be moments that you're going to fall back because that's just human nature. We are beings that don't create change until we have to. Think about people that smoke cigarettes.
Mm-hmm.
They don't quit smoking until the doctor says, hey, you got cancer, dude. And then they go, oh shit, I got to quit smoking. Too late, right? So we have to be preemptive. And so it's all about just kind of noticing where you are. And when you have these moments of falling back, you just go forward.
Yeah. So I quit smoking 10 years ago, and I also started running up to I made a half marathon, so I did not go to the marathon yet.
Nice.
And it's a very painful journey. I usually say I would go every single meter asking myself, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this?
Right. Yeah.
When you were explaining before your pre 28 years old life, there are two things that I would like to bring to you, more like to an opinion, not necessarily a lot of experience, but one thing is corporate America, and corporate America is no different than a lot of corporate other places, and that is a big contributor for mental health issues, right? And in my
Mhm.
LinkedIn and my social media, because I work for a corporate business and I'm some level of impact in the corporate business. I try to bring awareness. So I suffered depression when I was 20, and I speak very open about it. And since then, I've been maintaining my health, mental health, in the sense of learning how to deal with it, not necessarily like to heal. And I talk openly about. I usually say, if you don't talk about it, you won't fix it. If you talk about it,
Yes.
you will likely get better. And but the corporate world makes things much worse, right? The pressure, the media, the jobs, the careers, the everything around is not helping us to get healthy, right?
Hmm.
So what is your take in that, based on the people you're talking, based on the people you're helping? How do you see that in North America, of course, but also other places?
Yeah, and I'll speak to it more from my experience. It what growing up, it didn't feel like I would ever have that kind of job because I just didn't understand that it was possible. I thought that I would end up like cooking in a restaurant or being a janitor or I don't know, something very blue collar because that's just how it was where I grew up. No one that I knew like put on a suit and tie and went to work every day. It just wasn't a thing. And I had a friend who ended up getting a job working for an insurance company. And we were the same age and we went to the same high school. And I was like, holy shit, that's possible. And I made it right. Cause I didn't know, like somebody has to kind of show you the way first. And I made it my mission. I was like, I am getting a job in corporate America in the next 6 months. And I did it. Right. And so at 20 years old, I land this very lucrative job. What I didn't know going into it is that it is awful. And I think that there are a lot of things that need to be done. And you have to keep in mind, it's been almost 10 years since I worked a corporate job. It's been a very long time. Um, but while I was in it, you kind of are just a cog in the wheel. No,
Mhm.
and nobody particularly cares because you're replaceable, and you're always going down from senior orders, and there are no such things, or at least there used to be no such things as mental health days. And so little pieces of that I know are changing.
Yeah,
But I think as a whole, the scope is not a friendly place because I think the one of the biggest problems with working in a large company versus somewhere smaller on your own is that there's no space for you to really talk about what is actually going on in your life,
hmm,
right? In the corporate world, you very much kind of show up as this particular kind of person. And when you're that particular kind of person, it's very much like, hey, Jim, how was your day? Oh, it's great. Oh, or it's a lot of small talk and there's no interaction, and you can't like hug somebody if they do a great job, and even a high five might get you fired, and everyone's on eggshells all the time, and it's not conducive to health.
yeah,
And and I would love to say that I came out of corporate America understanding business better and how to be a great employee. And really, I reflected on it, and the worst period of my life was the time that I was working for this corporation. It really truly was, because I was working 60 hours a week, sitting at a desk, not exercising, eating crap food, consuming all the donuts and pizza and cakes and pies and pop and all of this stuff. And we know now that food, specifically sugar, really creates inflammation, which leads to all kinds
yeah,
of issues. But like looking at and understanding the scope of my mental health while I was in that corporate environment, it is not conducive to anything. I think that if you have the opportunity, and I want to say this too, like I worked that job for a long time because of money. There
yeah,
was no fulfillment.
yeah,
I did not give a shit about that job at all, but I loved the paycheck that came along with it. And I think that you really have to question yourself, is it worth it?
yeah,
Because you're trading your soul for money. And if you're doing that like I was doing that, you really have to kind of come to this thought process of, is it worth it? And I remember the night that I decided I was going to quit was because I'd figured out, oh no, I'm wasting my time, my talent, my energy, my effort, and more so the people around me, the people that I work with, a lot of them, not all of them, because I still have some amazing friends from being in that environment, but a lot of them, they're just in it and they don't care and they're not motivated and nothing matters. And it's just, you go to work, you clock in, you go home, you watch TV, you do it again. And I think that if that's your lifestyle and you're good with that, no judgment. I'm not going to judge you. I don't care. Like, live your life however you want to live your life. But if you're walking into that job every single day and you're like, I hate my job, I hate my boss, I hate the people that I work with, I don't even enjoy what I do, it's affecting my relationships, my partnerships, and my mental health, you
Yeah.
should fucking quit.
Yeah. You do something, right? Yeah. And I fully agree, man. I usually say when I'm talking about sociological topics that you have two very important things in life: it's time and people. And time is something you don't get back. So every single
Yes.
second we pass by, we don't get it back. So if you screw it up,
Yes.
if you waste it, man, you're gone, right? You don't get it
Yeah.
back. And I think the corporate world has a lot of those things, and I work with that. Doesn't mean there's fantastic people, but we have a lot of frustrated people that also has a negative energy and influence towards the others, right? And that's the problem.
Yes.
Like, creates like this ripple effect, and it's just growing, affecting others. But though today in corporate world we are having a lot more mental health awareness, and there are days you grew up in a place, and I don't know that place, but I know the places where I came from that are probably not as heavy, but a lot of those people and kids like you, or young guys like when you were, they go through a lot of painful situations, but there is a lack of support, right? It's very hard
Mm-hmm.
to get those kids into a place where they don't go to a direction that you were about to get, but you got out of it. What is happening in these areas, right? Why is this not getting better?
Yeah,
At
that's
least,
a
and I,
really
and I
good
don't know the
question.
details, but it's my feeling.
Yeah, that's a really good question. You know, in urban America, you know, in the United States specifically, um, it's hard. It's hard. It's impoverished and it's poor. And, you know, growing up, it was very strange for me because quite often, like my family, we were the most poor family of all the poor families, right? And so our clothes would come from donations or from the church or you know, from the neighbors, or our food. Like, often, man, I can't tell you how many times I stole food from the grocery store or from like the gas station, um,
Mm,
because it's just like that's kind of how it was. And there's not support because we very much as Americans live in a society that is predicated on this idea of like, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and figure it out, which to a point, I do agree with that. I think that you do have to have ownership and accountability for your life. But the only way that I have found that I've been able to do that successfully is through community and through the people that I'm surrounded with. And that doesn't really exist in a lot of urban culture because it's whenever people kind of start to come up in the world, uh, they're looked down upon. And you think that it would be very different, and looked down upon maybe isn't the right terminology, but it's very much like this mentality of, oh no, you think you're better than me? And that's kind of what starts to happen. Now, as a kid, I didn't know any better. I was just kind of like, oh, this is how it is. I don't think that most people are cognizant of the fact that they're stuck, right? And it's a mindset thing. And the support is something that you have to create. I mean, I grew up in a neighborhood where it was full of violence, and I would move, and then that neighborhood would be full of violence, and then I would move, and then that neighborhood would be full of violence. And it's like intergenerational. And you would see it, like my best friend's father, when I was like 14, like beat the crap out of him. His face was black and blue. And I was just like, oh, this is how it is. This
mhm.
isn't different than my home. And all it's like behind closed doors, there's always these secrets. And so, unfortunately, and especially as a boy growing up, those supports aren't there. I think entirely because it's generational. Our parents didn't have support, and their parents didn't have support, and so on and so forth. And then you end up in, you know, the turn of the century, the late 1800s, slave trades. We end up in America coming over and taking over the genocide of the Indians, and so on and so forth. In this country, what's very different about America, I think, two things. One, it's really a new country, right?
Mhm.
In the scheme of things, it's a pretty new country. And two, it's a country that is foundationally built on violence.
Mhm.
Even look at it now. Look at the media that is consumed by Americans. You turn on the news, it's all violence.
Mhm.
Somebody got murdered, car
Yeah.
crash, bad things happening. And you guys see it out in the world when you look back and you go, oh, look what's happening in America. It's not necessarily that bad though, and I'll
Yeah.
tell you why. Because I have come to find that there are incredible people trying to create change and make beautiful things happen here, and the trickle down effect of generational healing is beginning to happen, because now we have more access to information.
Mhm.
Now we're more connected. The internet has changed everything, man, because that's how you and I are talking.
Yeah.
That's how we connect with each other. That's how the world changes, through education and through communication. And now those same neighborhoods are starting to have programs. Those same neighborhoods are starting to have support. It's a lot more difficult for a kid to go hungry. I'm not saying it's not happening. I'm just saying it's more difficult for it to happen now because of support. And we're getting to this place, I think, in society as a whole, whereas in urban environments, people are coming to realize that they're really fucking their own lives up because of the way that they think. And people are pushing each other harder to be better than ever. It is so much different 20 years later than in the neighborhood that I grew up in than it is now. And I'm not saying the violence isn't there. I'm not saying the bad things aren't there, because they are. But what I am saying is that we are in this place of growth. And that's one of the most important things happening in the fabric of America right now. And I think it's going to be a slow change. Like, I don't even know that necessarily in my lifetime that we'll get to this place where I'll go, oh, you know what? America's really dope right now. They're doing the right things. Everybody's super healthy. I don't think that will happen, but I think that we're starting the process. And it's amazing to me. I mean, we have programs here like Big Brothers, Big Sisters, where people go to urban environments as adults and they help and they mentor children.
Yeah.
And we have better after school programs. And we have kids who, you know, for the first time ever, there's children meditating. My friend Lindsay, I'm going to give her a shout out. My friend Lindsay runs this company called Generation Wellness
Mhm.
out in the Pacific Northwest, and she's traveled the world teaching children mindfulness.
Yeah.
Like, that is happening, right? And so when I think about that, we are in this place where the world is growing as a whole, and it's just better than it's ever been. So I think we'll get to that place, but it's a complete 180 versus what I come from.
Yeah, and it is interesting. You mentioned something through the media. I have my own, I would say, philosophical discussions with the media. I always like to quote this statement from Denzel Washington, where he said, if you don't read the news, you are uninformed. If you read the news, you are misinformed." And I love it because the media is cultivating this fear and this feeling that everything is just falling apart and nothing is happening, and the people are just, I don't know, they're not getting anywhere. And it's good that you brought this up because I don't live in US, and we have probably an opinion that nothing is really happening there. It's just the same as always. And you just saying that that's not yet there, but it's something is happening, and it's happening because people are doing something. People like you, people
Hmm.
like your friend, and that's what we want to bring up also with this project, that people are doing something, and those are the things we have to share more, not just the negativity of everything.
Right.
Um,
Absolutely.
Michael, we are coming to an end on our time. But I always like to finish, and I think the way you explain things and the testimony you gave us, it's just so powerful that I don't want to finish without asking you to, if you are to say something for people to remember this conversation and remember, well, this is what I got from Michael in those 35 minutes. What is the message you would like to leave for people that is listening and they are probably afraid to do the first step? They think it's so complicated. They don't know how to help or to help themselves or helping someone else, because it's not just about helping someone else. Sometimes also helping ourselves. What is the message from you that went through all of these and you made it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a beautiful question. I started Think Unbroken for a reason, and that is because societally, people are often looked down on who have any type of mental health or emotional issue, right? And we're often labeled as broken, and that's not true. We just kind of need help and we need support, and we have to change the way that we interpret the world. Thus, think unbroken. To begin any journey, you have to first decide that you're going to take the journey. The most important thing that I think anyone can do, that I want the world to take away, anyone who listens to this, is to come to the realization that the only way anything in your life is going to change is if you first change the way that you think about the things that you want to happen. You have to begin to adapt a mindset that is going to allow you to implement a different lifestyle. Because until you do, until you get out of the victim mentality and become the hero of your own story, which means charting out the narrative in a way that has an end goal, you're always going to be stuck. You're always going to be looping. Nothing is going to change until you decide for it to change, because mindset is everything. And I think that once you come to that point, and I'll give you one of my personal mottos. This is how I live my life. It's no excuses, just results. We live in a world that will always allow us to make excuses for everything that happened. You have to hold yourself to a higher standard. And that begins with the way that you allow yourself to talk. So it's a lot of different pieces, but it all begins with mindset. Change your mind, change everything.
Super. Michael, really thank you. I think we have a big difference time zones. My day is almost over. Your day is about to start.
Yeah.
So I wish you a great day, and I hope that this message, this story, and this podcast is heard by a lot of people, because it's very powerful. And by doing that, we are helping a lot of people. Thank you very much for your time and for taking the time to talk to us.
It's absolutely my pleasure. Thank you so much, my friend.